Marketplace. We'll be back with all things considered at 7 p.m. tonight. Temperatures in the upper 50s tonight. Tomorrow, high around 68. WNYC 630.
Support for WNYC comes from the Museum of the City of New York, presenting Art Deco City New York postcards from the Leonard A. Lauder Collection, which celebrates New York City's emergence as a cosmopolitan metropolis. More at mcny.org.
WNYC, independent journalism in the public interest. 93.9 FM and AM 820. NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Viking, exploring the world in comfort. With a fleet of small ships, Viking offers travel experiences for the thinking person. Discover more at Viking.com.
All right, how about this? We'll do the economic news because, of course, but then a nice long conversation about artistry. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Barron's Streetwise podcast, hosted by Barron's Associate Editor Jack Howe, offering insights each week on business leaders and trend spotters, available everywhere. And by BlueConic. It's not how much customer data an organization collects, it's how much customer understanding that data yields. BlueConic.com, data for doers. And by Rubrik. When cyber attacks put businesses at risk, Rubrik provides the power to bounce back fast. More at Rubrik.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Con Risdall. It is Tuesday, today the 8th of October. Good as always to have you along, everybody. It is going to be another day or so until Hurricane Milton makes landfall on Florida's Gulf Coast. Meanwhile, people all across the Southeast are still trying to get a firm handle on the damage caused by Hurricane Helene. The dollar cost is set to run into the 12 figures, more than $100 billion, and a death toll likely to rise as well. As we know, climate change is making the physical impact of these big storms more intense, and there will be more of them. And as Marketplace's Kelly Wells reports, it's making the long tail of recovery more expensive, too.
Disaster recovery takes a lot longer than the public might think, says Andrew Rumbach. He's a senior fellow at the Urban Institute.
Once the event has gone by and the news coverage has stopped, recovery goes on for years or even decades.
There are backlogs for building permits, red tape that delays the arrival of federal funding, but his big complaint, that's mostly reactive.
We still spend the vast majority of money on disasters after they occur, on response and recovery, rather than investing more heavily before disasters to try to mitigate their impacts.
Of course, investment requires money up front, so the problems get exacerbated in communities that have less money.
They might be economically disadvantaged, where these disasters can just instigate downward spirals.
Headwaters economics researcher Kristen Smith says climate change is also causing more smaller disasters that aren't large enough to warrant federal funding.
Most people assume FEMA is coming in and paying for all of it. But study after study shows that actually it's the local governments that spend a good chunk of the money on it.
Then there's resistance to recovering with climate change in mind.
We help people rebuild houses. We don't revise building codes. We don't take the time to say, hey, listen, this area is now no longer really habitable.
Gabriel Filippelli leads the Environmental Resilience Institute at Indiana University.
And not doing it as like an ostrich with your head in the sand, right? It's going to happen again. It's just a matter of when.
Filippelli says recovering with resilience saves lives and has positive mental and physical health impacts that don't even show up in financial calculations. I'm Kaylee Wells for Marketplace.
Wall Street on this Tuesday. Markets, more broadly, actually. Oil down, stocks up. Details, numbers, you all know the drill. It's been almost 3 weeks since the Federal Reserve cut interest rates for the first time in more than 4 years. And yes, the federal funds rate is a 0.5 percentage point lower today than it was those 3 weeks ago. And in a way, things aren't really all that different. Businesses aren't suddenly deciding to jump into new projects. They're probably not loading up on new equipment or building out new factories. As Marketplace's Justin Ho reports, the biggest change brought on by that rate cut was in business owners' minds.
Over the last few weeks, John Kirk has been getting a lot of unsolicited phone calls
from lenders who have been on the call it sidelines for the last 18 months, 12 to 18 months. They're starting to call and say, okay, tell me, what are you working on?
Kirk is the CEO of an apartment development firm in New Braunfels, Texas, called the Lightpath Company. He says for most of the early part of this year, developers had trouble getting loans. That's because rates on construction loans were high, and so were construction costs. That made new projects too expensive and risky. But Kirk says that's starting to change.
You're seeing construction costs level out, and now you're seeing interest rates drop. So you're starting to see market fundamentals start to come back into play to make economic sense of these projects.
Kirk says he's not breaking ground on any projects right now, but he says he and other developers are laying a lot of groundwork.
You're investing with all your architects, your engineers, all your consultants. You're spending money to get a great set of drawings, submitting for permits. As a developer, you're making sure the site it can be developed.
It's not just big, expensive projects that are being affected by the Fed's rate cut. It's also the small, day-to-day realities of running a business.
Each month, we're paying between $5,000 and $7,000 just to debt.
Madeline Reeves runs Fearless Foundry, a marketing and consulting firm near Seattle. She's been trying to pay down her business debt, and right now she's focused on one of her business credit cards with a balance of about $27,000.
We're paying right now somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a month on that credit card. It's making a dent, but not nearly as much as I wish it could, because the interest rate, I think, on that card is close to 30%.
Reeves says she's thinking about taking out a new loan at a lower rate to cover that debt, or doing a balance transfer to a cheaper credit card. Either way, she says she can think of a lot of ways she'd rather spend that money than paying 30% interest.
One would be to put more money in the pockets of our team members, and two would be putting money into a profit account or a savings account that we can actually be holding on to that capital for a rainy day.
Meanwhile, other business owners see the Fed's rate cut as a sign that they can start feeling more confident.
Like our level of caution is reduced. Is probably a good way of saying it.
Spiro Papadopoulos is the CEO of Schlau Restaurant Group, which operates 7 restaurants in several states. He says he'd love to operate more, and now that interest rates are lower, he's been having more conversations with real estate brokers about expanding.
Like, hey, even though we may have passed on X 6 months ago, I still want to see opportunities like that, and our appetite for them is more than it was in the past.
A big reason Papadopoulos is feeling bolder about expanding is because lower interest rates also improve consumers' mindsets.
If new car loans are back to like 1 or 2% because they're incentivizing them and they can shave a couple points off their mortgage and put a couple $100, $200, $300, $400 more dollars into a disposable income, then that affects restaurants a ton.
And retailers and service providers and all the rest of the more than 2/3 of this economy that's driven by consumer spending. I'm Justin Ho for Marketplace.
The president of China, Xi Jinping, has promised to invite 50,000 young Americans to visit his country over the next 5 years. That is going to be a tall order, given that there are less than 900 Americans studying there now. There are, should you be curious, about 300,000 Chinese students here. But exchanges sending American visitors to China have ramped up over the past couple of months. Most are run by groups affiliated with the Chinese government. Some, though, are organized around sports, which is how New York University's men's and women's basketball teams wound up in Shanghai not too long ago. Marketplace's Jennifer Pack was there.
At a stadium in Shanghai, some 1,800 spectators have come to see the U.S. and China face off on the basketball court. First up, the men's team, NYU versus Shanghai Jiao Tong University. Among the players is NYU's Alan Mashensky.
Great opportunity, to come to China, experience a new culture. Probably would have never came here without the team, but it's exciting.
This is a friendly game, but far from ordinary. VIP guests include presidents of the government-linked Shanghai Friendship Association, the American Chamber of Commerce in China, and the U.S. Consul General in Shanghai, Scott Walker, who gave a speech before the game.
We believe that sports have a unique power to bridge divides and bring people together.
And there's a lot to bridge. The U.S. and China are divided over things like Chinese exports, American semiconductors, and Russia's war in Ukraine.
7, 6, 5.
When the NYU players are not on the court for this week-long trip, they've been doing touristy and cultural stuff, like the Ming Dynasty Yu Garden, Disneyland Shanghai, and a lesson in the traditional martial arts, Tai Chi.
I thought it was really cool. I was in one with my body.
That's Yasmin Clark with the women's team. She's also trying more modern aspects of China, like e-payment.
I've been using Alipay. It's really easy. You just kind of pull up your QR code and they scan it.
Her teammate, Chloe Teeter, says before they came to Shanghai, they were given a tip.
You can't jaywalk or else you could get severely injured. I thought New York, the traffic was crazy, but it's a lot more fast here.
The men's game ends. Shanghai Jiao Tong University wins 73-56. One Chinese student in the stands says she does get affected by negative U.S.-China relations.
I hesitate to visit the U.S. because there's a possibility I could encounter racism or discrimination.
Then I ask for her name, and she says, do I have to? She ends up giving me her English name, Jody Ji, which is not registered with the Chinese police. Like many people in China, she's self-censoring in case of official retaliation. So, have NYU students been asked to do the same? Again, Mashensky.
No, there was kind of do and say whatever you want. I mean, there's obviously this understanding of, hey, be careful. But yeah, we didn't get a fully pre-planned thing of what to say and what not to say.
Next up, the women's game. Again, NYU versus Shanghai Jiao Tong. American and Chinese officials say they want more exchanges like this, but they sure don't make it easy for people on both sides to keep in touch. China bans most Western apps used by the NYU students. Most Chinese use WeChat, an app scrutinized by the U.S. government for potentially allowing the Chinese Communist Party to collect the personal information of Americans. Shanghai Jiao Tong ends up winning the women's game 69-64. These exchanges have sometimes been criticized for tiptoeing around tough topics, but these trips still serve a purpose, says Mashensky after he returned to New York.
It's obviously better to go there because as you spend time there and you immerse yourself in the experience and the culture and the people, you start to understand their cultural norms, what they want, how they act, even how they do business, obviously.
He'd like to visit China again, he says, perhaps to a different city. In Shanghai, I'm Jennifer Pack for Marketplace.